Hey guys, welcome to episode 6 of
My Girlfriend the Artist.
This episode we are talking about anxiety and worry, and we want to say thank you to one of our viewers who suggested this topic. And I really do think it's a big topic, Sarah, because it affects so many of us, particularly at this time of the world where so many things are happening. And the time of this filming is COVID still, and the war in Europe. So there's a lot to be worried and stressed about. But one of the things that I have learned is that anxiety, in my opinion, is actually fear-based. And John Newton, who is one of the teachers I follow, he's an amazing guy. He's like a healer, but he doesn't call himself a healer. He says, I'm not a healer, but he really goes with you through these processes to go deep into your body, like where are things manifesting themselves. And he says, when you have anxiety about something, say for example the pandemic, it's not just that you're anxious about that particular thing like the pandemic, but there is an underlying fear inside you somewhere. Now where that comes from, who knows? And so when those feelings come up to you, you go into your body. And like the things that I've learned that I'm going to be sharing in this episode with you guys all is how deeply entrenched physically this is, but how we can unentrench it, how we can go deep into our body and have some strategies to undo all that anxiety. And then later I want to talk to Sarah about my own personal experiences with anxiety.
I really want to hear about those because I have never really been a super anxious person, but I was in my youth what I call a worry wart. And what I found that worry and anxiety are very similar, right? And the worry or the anxiety for me always did come from fear. And usually for me it was fear of failure or fear of things not working out the way that I wanted them to. But I also feel that, like you said, that anxiety is fear-based, right? So, there's such a wide range of emotions that we can experience, and fear is only one of them. Maybe anxiety is a version of fear, and it is an emotion. So there's an emotional aspect to anxiety, and then there's a physical where you feel it in your body, and then there's a mind part of it where the mind is having its own role in creating anxiety for us. So we might experience a trigger, or we get triggered and we have a fear response, and the fear response makes us anxious. And then instead of going, oh, I'm feeling anxious, where's this coming from? We start thinking about it and analyzing it, and we start trying to explain it. Or we even ask, why is this happening to me? Which is a completely useless question to ask, right? And the thoughts that we have end up being like an exaggeration of the fear turning into anxiety. So we're even making ourselves even more anxious just with our thoughts. And the thoughts become a story about what's happening to us. And it's an interpretation of what's happening instead of just an acceptance of what's happening. I feel like if we can stop this thought spiral, if we can stop the story that we're telling ourselves about what's happening to make us anxious, if we can stop that in its tracks, then we can diminish the anxiety that we're experiencing. What do you think about that, Chris?
I think that is absolutely spot on. I could not have said that better myself. It's, in my experience and from what I've learned, it's this brain. It can take us into stories that we don't need to go, and they're just harmful to our physical self. And when you have these thoughts, it builds in your body somehow, and it comes out as anxiety. And Dr. Wayne Dyer, who is an amazing man, but sadly has recently passed away, he said, you cannot control things outside of you, but you can control the things inside of you. So even if you do have anxiety, and I, I'm not a doctor or a psychologist or anything like that. I don't want to profess that, I know how to help you if you have extreme anxiety. But from my experience, at least, and all the teachings I've had, I know that when the anxiety builds and you think you're having an anxiety attack, which my psychologist calls a thought attack. She says, no, you're having a thought attack, she says. And it makes perfect sense because your brain is going into a story, like you say, it's going somewhere, and all these physiological symptoms are happening. So if you can stop where you are and just be and think about what's happening to you as opposed to what's wrong with me and all these things, you actually can change what's going on inside of you. And I have learned that when you start feeling these things, say you're having say it really explodes. One of the things that I do is, unfortunately for me, I don't have this hardly ever anymore, but with my autoimmune disease and my leaky gut, what happens to me physiologically is it had caused me to have anxiety attacks, thought attacks, and I had never had those in my life before. It was very scary, I can tell you that for sure. You feel like you're out of control. You don't know what's happening. You don't even know where it came from. I mean, I remember one time I was walking in the forest and just, walking with my dog, happy as a clam, and suddenly my brain jumped to something else and my whole body was just frozen. It was so scary what was happening to me. Like you said, Sarah, it's stopping and saying, okay, what's happening? Breathing. First of all, breathing. And if you're having a really hard time, if it's really escalated, is coming back to where you are. So what do I see? I see my this, I see that, I see the window, I see the doors, I see the bed, I see the whatever. What do I smell? What do I feel? Breathe, calm yourself down with the breathing. The breathing is huge. And then to just say, just to name it, which is huge, is the naming part, right? And okay, what's happening? I'm scared, I'm sad, I'm afraid, I'm like whatever, and just observing what's there, and breathing deeply, like right into your belly, and deep long breaths out. Viktor Frankl is an amazing guy, and he's got these best quotes ever, and he says, between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So by saying that we have a choice. We can go along with these stories, follow our brain into these stories, work ourselves up even more, or we stop. We can choose how we're going to respond to this. We have the tools, like I've just told you. And Lisa Nichols, I don't know if you guys know who she is. She is a fabulous motivator. She's amazing. She says, fear. She says, you can come in the car, but you ain't going to drive, she says. I just love that so much. Yeah, the fear is there. Okay, I'm afraid, but you're not going to take control because I'm in control. I know I talked a lot there, Sarah, but does that resonate with you?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I actually love that Viktor Frankl quote because I just put it in an art journal spread like last week.
That's so cool.
And, because it just shows how much on the same wavelength we are, Chris. And a couple of, resources that I was tapping into for this episode say similar things. So Eckhart Tolle has counseled that in order to have peace, like inner peace, you need to get out of your mind. You have to stop letting your mind drive the car. And the way that he suggests doing that is, like you say, start becoming just being. Just say, instead of saying I am this or this is this, it's I am. And this is. And you're just accepting the conditions in front of you without explaining them or interpreting them or judging them or analyzing them. And so you're not, your thoughts aren't like racing and running around, you're just being. And the stories that we were talking about, once you can quiet the story, quiet the thoughts, then you're really you, because you're not the story. That's just your thoughts. And when you're really you, that's when you can settle in to calm and peace and just acceptance of the moment being the moment, and realize that the moment is the moment and it's only here for as long as it's here. It passes. So that's one of the things that kind of I've used recently in terms of dealing with my own anxiety, or waking up in the middle of the night and with thoughts racing and I can't get back to sleep, but I need rest. And it's just like this, it's another thought spiral, right? The thoughts are keeping me awake. And of course, breathing is essential to this. But basically, breathing gives you that space that Viktor Frankl is talking about, where if you just start breathing, that's the space between the stimulus and the response. And then you can choose your response. And when I'm trying to go back to sleep, my response is, I just need to let it go. I just need to breathe. I just need to relax. And like you say, observe. Yeah, that's one of the things that I learned about in Mark Brackett's book called Permission to Feel. He encourages you to be an emotion scientist instead of an emotion judge, right? The emotion scientist is the one that open-mindedly and curiously looks at emotion and looks at our response in order to say, where is this coming from? You know, and it kind of separates you from it a little bit. So you're not identifying with this emotional upheaval. You're being able to take a step away from it and just look at it more objectively in trying to understand kind of the source of it and then how to respond to it, versus being an emotion judge. A judge in any situation, right, is looking to place blame or looking to, find fault, right? That's judgment. And so if we can get away from judgment and go into more observation and being more of a scientist, objective observer of what's going on, then we can process things a little more calmly, I feel like. That's pretty consistent with what you've been saying, Chris.
Yeah, like you say, we're definitely on the same page with this. I think we have some fabulous information from other people that we're sharing here today. I'm really excited about that. And to our viewers, I hope that this is helping you guys in some way, that we are sharing our experiences and our knowledge and our learnings with you, because, it really is a big deal. Sarah, I love how you said this no judgment, because you have to remain objective. Because the minute you start judging, then you're experiencing the failure. And again, the stories are happening. And I love also how you said just being. I am. This is what's here at the moment. This is what I am observing, non-judgmentally, completely objectively. Putting your hand on your heart if you need to. It's okay. I'm going to be okay, and all that kind of stuff. Like it is a process, and you do have to practice it. But the tools are simple, but they're so effective.
True. And I mean, Eckhart Tolle, one of the things that he said that really just kind of sunk in for me and just seemed so clear, and it's really basic, but it's like when we're caught up in the moment of an anxiety spell or can't get back to sleep, we're not thinking about the simple things, right? We're going off into all these complex thoughts. One of the things that he says is that is resisting the moment. When we get into the story, we're resisting what is instead of accepting what is. And if you can just kind of accept what it is, and he says, as though you chose it. Accept the moment as though you chose it. can you see how that immediately just diffuses it all? Like, all of a sudden it's like, well, I must be experiencing this for a reason. And so you get out of judgment, and you're free then to say, well, if I chose this, I can choose differently. And I choose to accept it, surrender, move on in a way I want to go. Like you say, it's the choice.
Oh, wow. That quote is just beautiful. Accept that I chose this. Yeah, that's really so empowering, isn't it? I love it. I want to share one last quote too. This is more a quote of worry, but it really to me is all under the same umbrella. And the quote is by Epictetus. And he says, "There is only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about the things which are beyond the power of our will." And I think that comes back to, again, what you said, Sarah, just being in the moment. And it makes me think of mindfulness, because really that's what mindfulness practice is, isn't it?
Yes, and I think part of the way that we end up in trouble, or we end up suffering, is because we can't control a whole lot, like you say, externally, outside ourselves. We cannot control really any of it, but we want to. We seek to. And our ego really, really needs to try to control things. And the feeling of trying to control that's your mind and your ego is actually a vicious cycle, because first of all, the premise is you can control things. No, you can't, right? And so because that's a false premise to begin with, the ego trying to control everything just makes you suffer more. So with Eckhart Tolle, letting go of your thinking and stopping the thoughts and identifying with the thoughts is letting go of the ego and taking the ego out of the equation of running the show. And so that once you do that, you surrender. You surrender control and realize, I can't control this. It's whatever's happening, whatever's going on that I can't control. I just have to accept it and make choices as I can to, in my own best interest, to feel better. And I mean, one of the experiences that I had when I was in the hospital, I kind of go back to my cancer experience because it taught me so much. This hardship, it ends up teaching you, right? And I was in the hospital. It was late at night. It was probably like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I was due to get my pain meds, so I was in pain, but they weren't going to come for like another hour or something. It was so quiet and dark, and I was alone, and I was afraid. And I broke down. I started to tear up a little bit, and then I realized I had a feeding tube down my nose, and that if I started crying, I wouldn't be able to blow my nose. I'd just have snot running down my face. It wasn't going to be a good thing at all. And it was so like this physical image of myself trying to deal with a runny nose with the situation I had going on just kind of stopped me in my tracks. It stopped all of these thoughts and these fears, because it was like in the current moment, it just isn't a good idea to get sad and cry. And when I stopped in my tracks in that way, I was able to say, look, this sucks, this moment sucks, but today is better than yesterday was, and tomorrow is going to be better than today. And then I could feel okay. I felt more at peace, and I actually felt less in pain as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, it still breaks my heart that you had to go through that. But you're so strong, in the middle of the worst case scenario of your life. You brought yourself out of it.
Thanks, Chris.
Sarah, do you have any final thoughts before we dive into our journal?
I think that I wanted to mention that one of the ways that I am able to be an emotion scientist, and one of the ways that I'm able to be more an observer of what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing. And one of the ways in which I can, look within instead of trying to control without is by working in my art journal. And by practicing the process of just letting go and letting whatever happens happen without overthinking everything, and trusting my intuition and my gut and just my own happiness and joy in the process of engaging in art in my art journal, it helps me recognize, and I think I've said this before, it helps me recognize how that process can translate into my everyday life. And that is why I have consistently art journaled over so many years, and why I will always continue to do it, and why I really want to share the process of doing that with other people by teaching it.
Wow, that's a perfect segue. And you're so right. Isn't that the whole point of art journaling? Is the self-expression and letting all that come out with your materials and your paper, and it's no rules and nobody has to see it. And it's just the best form of self-expression that I know anyway. So I'm really excited to see what's going to happen this episode, Sarah.
I already have a few ideas, so I'm excited to get going in my art journal. And
my friend, I love you. And to our viewers, I love you as well. We are so grateful for you. Thanks for coming along on this ride. It's been an amazing journey for us, and we appreciate your support, and I hope that we've inspired you and helped you along the way as well.
Yes, indeed. We really appreciate you watching, and thank you for the suggestion to our viewer for a discussion about anxiety. We hope that these conversations are beneficial to you guys, and we'd love it if you engaged in the conversation a little, but leave some comments below our videos. Thank you so much for watching. We do really appreciate your support, and we love you. And Chris, I love you too. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.